Hello, I'm Dr. Catherine. I'm a French and Canadian veterinary surgeon, and I specialize in wild animal health at the Royal Veterinary College in London. My project was to work on lead exposure in carnivores and cheetahs and leopards in Namibia. So I'll show you what I did, and I hope you are interested. So it was a comparative analysis among captive cheetahs, and wild leopards. And I work with Cheetah Conservation Fund, Royal Veterinary College, and the Zoological Society of London. So just to let you know, cheetahs are classified as endangered in Namibia with the red list, and they're hunters, so they don't scavenge, they only hunt. And leopards are classified as vulnerable. They're solitary hunters, but also sometimes opportunistic scavengers. That's how a cheetah roars. No, it just meows. It's very cute, very scary. So lead exposure in wildlife is a real One Health issue, and it's been said to be one of the major unregulated sources of lead within the environment is lead ammunition. So it's the main contributor also to environmental lead contamination that wildlife could potentially encounter. How does it work? Well, you probably know, but a hunter will shoot a prey. The bullet will scatter upon impact, and then around 40 centimeters diameter around that wound, there is all of those fragments, microfragments of lead that are dispersed around the organs. This is a roe deer shot in the thorax, courtesy of Dr. Oliver Crone. So if we look at just the slide before, we can see this is a lead ammunition bullet. And if we look at the lead-free deforming bullet one, we can really see that the bullet enters inside of the chest of the animal, gets out, and there's no fragmentation. There's also no lead inside, so it's way safer. What happens here is that how does it affect us? Obviously, it affects humans because of game meat. We will eat those fragments of lead, so we'll eat contaminated meat sometimes via lead, and it affects wild scavengers. How? Because hunters often will discard those offals, those organs on the floor, and leave that and get the meat back home. The problem is those offals, these organs that are discarded, are full of small fragments and microfragments of lead, creating a contaminated meat. And who eats those kind of meat and organs? It's the scavengers. So we know that scavengers are often prone to lead poisoning. And why is that? Because we know that lead has no biological significance at all, meaning we don't have it inside of our body, we can't metabolize it, we excrete it just a small amount, and it creates a lot of different signs like neurological, reproductive signs, and cardiovascular signs. Most research were done in scavenger birds, as you will probably see today, but there's a small, only little literature exists on lead in wild mammalian and carnivores. And there's a study that just came out of Heli B. Haideskov. It's a very good study from Journal Wildlife Diseases. It's a global systematic review on lead exposure and its effect on wild mammals. And the conclusion was that there is a need for more carnivorous and scavenger mammal species studies because they can have a sentinel role, so they can be an indicator of environmental lead contamination, showing and reflecting the ecological health and potential human impact. They act as apex predators, so therefore an apex predator will bioaccumulate lead across trophic levels, and therefore it's a powerful indicator of environmental lead levels. And the scavengers can be used as long-term monitors, because if we use a lot of scavenger birds, unfortunately the birds, it's often acute lead poisoning and they die. Whereas scavengers, like hyenas, like jackals, like even leopards sometimes, they will stay alive, and they will stay alive for 10, 20 years, and therefore they will show and exhibit long-term clinical signs, which will therefore provide insights into the impact of lead exposure long-term. So there's only one cheetah study that ever has been done, showing 2 fatal acute cases. There's another study that I'm at the moment publishing on a fatal acute case in Namibia, and no studies on any African mammalian carnivores on lead exposures yet. So today I will show you the 2 cases that I've been working on and that I'm publishing the two different articles. One is a case study that I will show you now, and the other one is a manuscript that I will show you just after on the leopards and the cheetahs. So the acute case study is a captive female cheetah that was reintroduced into the protected wild. It was supposed to be reintroduced. Her name was Adina. But during the stage of the boma, so when you reintroduce a cat from a captive environment to the wild environment, usually it goes through a boma. So it's a protected environment in which you will, instead of giving them just a piece of meat every day, like in captive environment, you will give them at that moment a big carcass that is shot with lead often. And unfortunately, those carcasses are often full of microfragments of lead, and also the lead itself bullet that is left inside, because we give a full carcass for the animal to learn how to eat in a wild environment. We're not teaching them how to hunt, but we're still teaching them how to eat a whole carcass. And unfortunately, this Adina, so this cheetah inside of the boma, started exhibiting neurological behaviors for about 3 days, and there was a sudden death after 72 hours. What we found is a bullet in the stomach and high concentrations of lead in her liver, kidney, and necrosis and hemorrhage. So this is a really interesting and important video that I'm going to show soon. And this is the neurological signs that are exhibited by the cheetah in the boma. So you see the raised tail just before the arched back. It's jumping, it's a bit neurologic. You'll see really well the raised tail here. And unfortunately, you will see also the death is an opistotonus, so when the neck is up, so it's usually a neurological death. We found a chewed bullet inside of the stomach. We found hemorrhages in nearly all of the organs. And the histopathology of the kidneys showed a lot of tubular necrosis, extensive hemorrhages, loss of tubular epithelial cells, and hemorrhages in the glomeruli. So all of those are often signs. They're not pathognomic, but they are signs of potential lead poisoning. And unfortunately, the lead in the organs were very high. As I said earlier, you should really have 0 milligram per kilogram inside of your organs, and here 38 and 56 in the kidneys. So our study was more of a long term exposure study. So if you look at blood, you will look at maybe a couple of weeks only of lead exposure. If you look at organs, potentially up to 6 months. But if you look at bones, you can have a long-term exposure from 8 to even sometimes 12, 16 years of exposure to lead. Here, so we looked at captive cheetahs, wild cheetahs and leopards, and wild leopards. So there's 3 different ways really that those animals can be affected by lead. First, bioaccumulation. All wild carnivores who are going to the lead ammunition will fall on the ground, or the ground will be also contaminated by, let's say, lead mines around. The grass will be therefore contaminated. The herbivores will eat the grass, and the wild carnivores will hunt the herbivores. So this is a trophic chain bioaccumulation of lead in wild carnivores. On top of that, there are 2 other ways that a wild carnivore, can be affected by lead. There is opportunistic scavenging. So as I said, eating the organs that are contaminated. Those are the wild leopards that sometimes opportunistically scavenge. And then cheetahs, as we said, they don't scavenge, they just hunt. And therefore the other way, and quite an important way, is in captive cheetahs. So those are the leopards, my mother's drawing, the leopard that will eat the pile of viscera and the hunter we leave with the animal. And then the last one is the captive cheetahs. What happens is often in captivity, cheetahs are fed with meat that is slaughtered with lead ammunition. In this sanctuary, the animals were slaughtered with a lead bullet directly inside of the head. And those heads were often given to the cheetahs to eat. Therefore, what we think, our hypothesis is that the captive cheetahs will have, unfortunately, the highest amount of lead, the wild leopards a bit less, but still with opportunistic scavenging, and the wild carnivores the least, because bioaccumulation is not that high. Our methods were to use tibias, because tibias and long bones are the best indicator of lifelong exposure of lead. We had 3 different groups: the captive group, the wild group, and then the mixed life group. So we're working on cheetahs right now. The mixed life group is the ones that I said go from captive to wild, and we have a period in the bomas. And then the leopards were all wild. So this is me in the Cheetah Conservation Fund, and I'm taking the tibias. This is Professor John Yabe, a pathologist and lead specialist who has helped me at the Central Veterinary Lab in Windhoek in Namibia to digest in microwave digestion and ICP-MS the bones. What we found is that, 1, the bone lead concentration of wild leopards is higher than in wild cheetahs, which was what we thought, because leopards opportunely scavenge. The bone lead concentration of captive cheetahs was higher than in wild and mixed cheetahs, which also was unfortunately what we hypothesized. As you really can see, it's quite high in captive cheetahs, 1.66, significantly higher in captive and mixed than in wild. And the time in captivity had a significant effect on bone lead concentration. This is quite a problem, as you know, because first, we don't want our scavengers to be intoxicated and poisoned by lead ammunition. But also, we don't want our animals that are endangered, like cheetahs, to be affected when we want from captivity to reintroduce them into the protected wild. As we said, lead will detrimentally affect reproductive rates and cognitive abilities. Those are very important when we want to reintroduce them into the wild and for them to procreate and have more babies. So given that cheetahs have a slow reproductive rate, a limited population size of about 6,700, and are classified as endangered, we need to take measures to reduce potential sources of lead exposure that could contribute significantly to their conservation efforts. So in conclusion, for captive cheetahs, it's important to educate on the dangers of lead in sanctuaries to key stakeholders like the keepers, the directors, the vets, for the daily feeding in captivity and for the reintroduced animals and bomas. And for the wild mammalian scavengers, the emphasis on the importance of transitioning to non-leaded ammunition for slaughtering and hunting to protect wild scavenging carnivores and minimize lead pollution in the environment and therefore in humans too. So this is a nice drawing that was done at the Berlin Conference of Wildlife Research and Conservation by Jagoba Malumbres Olarte. And I have a PhD project at the moment on PAG exposure in carnivores in South Africa. You can definitely email me if you're interested in collaborating or chatting more about the project. Have a lovely day and take care.